Jesus told me why most people never change, and the truth was nothing like the hopeful stories we tell ourselves. The world loves to preach growth and redemption, but what he showed me was colder, older, and rooted in a kind of pride we inherit without knowing. And if you stay with me, I'll tell you the exact sentence he said that shattered everything I believed. I wasn't looking for a message that night. I wasn't trying to understand why people never change. I was just tired in the kind of way that sinks into your bones. It was late, the house was quiet, and for the first time in days, I thought I might sleep without my mind running in circles. I turned off the lights and sat alone in the living room. The window was open, and a thin line of streetlight fell across the floor. It made the room look colder than it really was. I remember thinking how strange it felt that a day so ordinary could end in a moment I'd never forget. My body was worn out, not the dramatic kind of exhaustion people brag about, just the slow, steady fatigue that comes from carrying the weight of too many thoughts. I had spent the whole day watching people argue on television. Politics, history, privilege, blame, every voice louder than the last, no one listening, no one admitting anything, everyone insisting they were right. It drained me more than any physical work ever could. I leaned back on the sofa and closed my eyes. My head felt heavy, my chest felt tight. I wasn't sad, I wasn't angry. I was just tired of human beings pretending they changed when almost none of them ever do. The air in the room shifted. That's the only way I can describe it. 1 second it was normal, the next it felt like the entire house held its breath. The sound from outside faded. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to fall silent. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't frightening. It was different. Unnaturally still. I opened my eyes, expecting to see something wrong, maybe a power outage, maybe the wind moving the curtains, but nothing had changed. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. There was a pressure in the air, the kind you feel just before a storm hits. A sense that something was approaching, something that didn't belong to the world I knew. I sat up. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That surprised me. You'd think a moment like that would make a man panic. But I didn't. I felt calm, too calm, as if someone had placed a hand on my chest and told it not to fear. Then the light shifted again. Not brighter, not darker, just focused. Like the whole room narrowed into a single point. A point I couldn't see but could feel pulling at me. I remember whispering, "What is happening?" No answer. No sound. No movement. Just that quiet pull, steady and patient. I stood, though I didn't decide to. My legs moved before my mind did. It felt like walking into a memory I didn't recognize. I took one step, then another. The room around me softened, like a photograph losing sharpness at the edges. I should have felt fear, but I didn't. I felt expectation, the kind you feel when something important is about to be said. The silence grew heavier. I could hear my own breathing, slow, deep, controlled, as if I wasn't the one controlling it. And then the thought came not from me but toward me. You're about to understand why people never change. I felt the words before I heard them. Felt them in my chest, in my spine, in a place deeper than thought. And the room that only seconds earlier had felt empty, suddenly felt occupied. Not by a dream, not by an idea, by someone. And that's where the real story begins. I didn't see him at first. I only felt the presence. It was like someone else was in the room, standing just outside my line of sight. Not threatening, not loud, just there. The air around me tightened, like the moment before you open a door you're not sure you should open. I turned my head slowly, and that's when I saw him. Jesus didn't appear with thunder or fire. There was no blinding light, no shaking ground, no sound of angels in the distance. He was simply standing there, in the quiet, as if he had been in the room long before I noticed. He looked at me the way a doctor looks at a patient before delivering news that will change everything. Calm, steady, honest. His eyes were clear, not harsh, not soft, but direct in a way that stripped every excuse from your skin. There was nowhere to hide in that gaze. I didn't move. I couldn't move. His presence didn't feel like a dream. Dreams are fuzzy around the edges. This moment was sharp, focused, like the world had clicked into a higher resolution. Every detail was strange and familiar at the same time. The way he stood, the tilt of his head, the quiet behind his silence. "Why do you think people never change?" That was the first thing he said. No introduction. No warm-up. No gentle lead. He went straight to the truth, like someone cutting through a thick rope. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was normal, human, and that made it even heavier. I swallowed hard. My mouth felt dry. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe people are scared." He shook his head once. "Fear is not the reason." I felt something inside me tighten, like he had just closed a door behind us, leaving me alone with the truth. I'd spent my whole life avoiding. He took one step closer. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. His presence filled the space between us in a way that didn't feel physical. It felt like he could see straight through every memory ID ever tried to justify. "Most people," he said softly, "do not change because they do not believe they need to." The words hit harder than any sermon I've heard in my life. Harder than any argument. Harder than any mistake I tried to forget. He didn't accuse me. He didn't accuse anyone. He simply stated the truth. The way you state a fact about gravity or time. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. His eyes kept me in place, not by force, but by honesty. There was no anger in them, only a deep sadness, the kind you carry after watching humanity repeat the same mistakes for too many centuries. "History repeats," he continued, "because pride repeats." A simple sentence, a painful one. I could feel the weight of generations in his voice. Entire stories of people refusing to see themselves. Entire nations building walls of denial. Entire families passing down the same excuses, the same blindness, the same comfortable lies. I whispered, "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. He let the silence work first. Then he spoke again, slower this time, as if each word had to land in the right place. "You cannot change a person who refuses to look in the mirror." The room felt smaller. The air felt thinner. My heartbeat sounded louder than his voice. And I realized then this wasn't a warning. It was a revelation, the kind that doesn't let you go once you've heard it. He didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at me with a calm that felt older than anything I'd ever known. The room around us seemed to fade, as if the world had stepped aside so I could hear what he was about to say. "Look closely," he said. "You've been blind." The words didn't feel like an insult. They felt like a diagnosis. A truth delivered without anger. A truth I had spent most of my life avoiding. He lifted his hand, not high, not dramatic, and the air shifted again. The room dissolved into something else. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't a memory. It was more like being pulled into a story that had been happening for centuries without me noticing. I saw people, crowds, streets from different eras, generations repeating the same arguments with different clothes and different slogans. I watched families break over the same patterns, nations fighting over the same wounds. The faces changed, but the behavior didn't. It was the same cycle playing again and again. "This," he said, "is what happens when pride becomes inheritance." I saw a man yelling, insisting he was right. I saw a woman refusing to apologize. I saw children growing into adults who carried the same blind spots as their parents. No one thought they were wrong. No one even considered it. "They don't change," he continued. because they've learned to protect their comfort more fiercely than their character. The scene shifted. I saw history, not the kind you read in school, but the hidden kind, the kind people whisper about but never confront. Decisions made out of fear, privileges handed down quietly. Entire chapters ignored to protect a clean story. This, he said, is why the world repeats itself. I watched generations walk around the truth as if it were a hole in the ground, pretending not to see it, pretending it wasn't there, pretending they weren't standing on top of the wounds they refused to face. They want forgiveness, he said, but they do not want honesty. I felt something tighten in my chest. The images hit too close. I could see myself in them. Times I defended a story because it made me feel better. Times I ignored the pain of others because it didn't touch my life. Moments I called normal simply because they benefited me. The room darkened, not with fear but with clarity. People tell themselves they change, he said, but they only rearrange their excuses. The vision shifted again. This time I saw individuals' faces full of good intentions, but empty of self-awareness. People trying to fix their lives without touching their pride. People trying to heal without admitting the damage they caused. People trying to evolve without letting go of their old narratives. What about hope? I asked. My voice shook. What about redemption? He stepped closer. Redemption requires truth, he said, and truth requires humility. Simple, direct, impossible to ignore. He let the silence stretch, as if giving me time to absorb every part of it. Then he said the sentence that cut deeper than anything before. Most people never change because they prefer a comforting lie over a demanding truth. I felt it in my spine, in my stomach, in every memory where I chose the easy version of myself instead of the honest one. The visions faded, the room returned, but the truth stayed. It stayed like a weight I had been carrying my whole life, without realizing it, and for the first time, I understood. This wasn't just a revelation. This was a mirror. The room was quiet again, but something inside me was not. The revelation he gave me didn't sit on the surface like a simple idea. It went straight through me, sharp and clean, the way truth cuts when it's been ignored for too long. I felt my knees weaken. I reached for the back of a chair, but my hand missed it. My balance slipped. My breath broke. I wasn't afraid. I was exposed. It felt like someone had taken every moment I ever avoided, every flaw I ever explained away, and stacked them in front of me in a single line. No excuses. No filters. No softer versions. I tried to look away, but my mind kept dragging me back to the truth he had shown. Faces, moments, choices, times. I refused to admit I was wrong. Times I let pride speak for me. Times I used comfort as a shield instead of facing what needed to change. It hit me harder than anything in my life. I can't do this, I whispered, but the truth didn't let go. My chest tightened. My throat burned. My eyes stung, not from sadness, but from recognition. That was the part that hurt the recognition. I wasn't just watching the world fail to change. I was watching myself do it too. I dropped to my knees, not out of reverence, out of collapse. The weight was too much to keep standing. My hands hit the floor. My fingers curled against the carpet. I could feel my heartbeat in my palms, fast and uneven. I thought I tried, I said. My voice cracked. I thought I grew. Jesus didn't move. He didn't comfort me. He didn't soften his expression. He let me break, because breaking was the only honest thing I had done in a long time. You tried to feel better, he said, not to change. The sentence stripped the last of my defenses. I felt something inside me tear open, quiet, invisible, but real, a kind of inner ripping you can't hide from. Memories came fast. The arguments where I had to win. The apologies I expected but never gave. The moments I judged others without understanding the world they carried. the mistakes I buried under the phrase, "I am only human." I pressed my forehead to the floor. My breath shook. Tears came, not loud, just steady, clean, like something old had finally cracked open and was pouring out. "I didn't know," I said. "You didn't want to know." That line hit deeper than the rest, because I knew it was true. I had lived a long life, but even then, there were corners of my story I never touched, places where honesty demanded too much courage, places where pride had built a wall I never questioned. "I am ashamed," I whispered. "Good," he said. "Shame is not punishment, it is recognition." The room felt colder, not cruel, honest. My shoulders shook. I didn't try to stop it. I didn't try to hide. For the first time, I let myself feel the truth without fighting it. I stayed there for a long time on the floor, in silence, breathing through the weight of everything I had never admitted. And the strange thing was, beneath the pain, beneath the trembling, there was something else, relief, a small one, but real, because breaking meant the lies were finally gone. And once the lies fall away, there's only one direction left to go. I stayed on the floor for a long time. My breathing slowed. My hands stopped shaking. The room felt steady again, but I didn't feel steady at all. Something in me had been pulled open, and I knew it wasn't going to close the way it was before. Jesus watched me quietly, not with judgment, not with pity, just with an understanding that was older than anything I could imagine. When I finally lifted my head, he spoke. "Now you're ready to hear the truth." His voice was calm, simple, direct. The kind of tone people use when they're not trying to convince you of anything. They're just telling you the way things are. "Change doesn't come from effort," he said. "It comes from humility." I frowned. The word felt too small for what I had just experienced. "What do you mean?" I asked. He stepped closer. "People try to change through willpower, through promises, through guilt, through motivation. None of it lasts, because they never touch the root." He pointed not at me, not at the room, but at something deeper. "The root is pride, and pride protects the lie." I swallowed. "What lie?" "That you are already good enough, that you already know enough, that your story is the whole story, that your perspective is the complete picture." He paused, letting the weight of each sentence settle. As long as people protect that lie, they will repeat themselves. I felt those words sink into the cracks of everything I had tried to defend my whole life. Jesus continued, "Humility is not weakness. It is the courage to face the truth without running. It is the strength to admit what you inherited, what you ignored, what you allowed to grow." He wasn't talking about guilt. He wasn't talking about shame. He was talking about clarity, about the courage to see the parts of yourself you spent years looking away from. "People say they want transformation," he said, "but they want it without discomfort. They want growth without surrender. They want healing without honesty." He looked at me as if he had watched the entire human race do this for generations. "Change requires a cost," he said. "Not money, not talent, not intelligence." He paused. "It requires the death of pride." The sentence hit hard. I whispered, "That sounds painful." "It is," he said simply. "But pride is the only thing that dies. And once it dies, everything else can finally live." I sat with that for a moment. My breath steadied, my shoulders lowered. For the first time since the dream began, I felt something that surprised me. Lightness, not joy, not relief, but a kind of quiet honesty that made the room feel bigger. Jesus continued, "Do you know why people cling to pride?" I shook my head, because pride protects identity, and they're afraid that if they let it go, they will lose themselves. He stepped closer. But the truth is the opposite. You do not lose yourself when pride dies. You find yourself. He let those words stand. They didn't need decoration. They didn't need explanation. He finished with one final line, slow, steady, unforgettable. Humility does not make you smaller, it makes you real. I felt that sentence carve itself into me. A lesson so simple, so direct, so powerful that it could only have come from a place beyond human reasoning. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted inside me forever. When the lesson settled, the room changed again. Not with light, not with sound, with quiet. A quiet so deep it felt like the world around me had stepped aside. I was still on the floor, knees weak, breathing slow, but something inside me was different, not fixed, not healed, just open. Open in a way I hadn't felt in decades. Jesus didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. The silence itself felt like part of the message. A reminder that real change doesn't begin with noise. It begins with honesty. Finally, he said, "Stand." I did. My legs were shaky, but they held. My chest felt lighter than it had in years, not because the truth was easy, but because I had stopped fighting it. "You cannot go back to who you were," he said. I knew he was right. Something had broken in me. Something old, something stubborn, something I thought I needed to protect. But now that it was gone, I didn't miss it. Pride feels heavy when you're carrying it, but you only realize how heavy after you set it down. "What happens now?" I asked. "You begin again," he said, but this time with eyes that see. The room softened, the edges blurred. The world I came from began to pull me back, like a tide reclaiming something it had lent me for a moment. Jesus stepped back, not far, just enough to let me breathe on my own. He wasn't disappearing. He was releasing me. "Remember this," he said. "Humility is not a moment. It is a practice. Practice it, and you will change. Ignore it, and you will return to the old path." I nodded, not because I fully understood, but because I wanted to. The room faded, the light shifted, and suddenly I was awake. I opened my eyes to the familiar ceiling of my bedroom. The early morning light was slipping through the curtains, soft and thin. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic. It was real, and it felt new. I took a breath, slow, steady. It felt like the first honest breath I had taken in a long time. I sat up, the world looked the same, but I didn't see it the same. Small things caught my attention. The sound of a car passing outside. The creak of the wooden floor as I stood. The weight of the sunlight on the windowsill. None of it was special, but all of it felt clearer. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. As I drank it, I realized something simple. I wasn't trying to be better. I wasn't pretending to change. I wasn't rehearsing a new version of myself. I was just honest, and honesty felt like oxygen. Later that day, I stepped outside and saw my neighbor walking his dog. Normally I would nod, say a polite hello, and keep moving. But something in me shifted. I stopped. I looked him in the eye, and I asked how he was doing. Not the casual kind, the real kind. He looked surprised. Then he answered, a real answer. Something had been holding in, something heavy. And for the first time, I didn't listen to respond. I listened to understand. That was the first sign of the change. Not a miracle, not a transformation written in the sky. Just a small movement of the heart and a quiet shift in the way I saw the world and the people living in it. That's how transformation begins. Not loud, not grand, but honest. When I woke up that morning, I knew something in me had shifted for good. Not because the dream was dramatic, not because the vision was loud, but because the truth had finally found a place to stand inside me. Real change never begins with fireworks. It begins with honesty, and honesty hurts before it heals. For the rest of that day, I kept thinking about what Jesus showed me, the patterns we inherit, the pride we defend, the stories we polish to protect ourselves from uncomfortable truths. I saw how often I had confused comfort with clarity, how many times I had told myself I changed when all I did was rearrange my excuses. I saw how long I lived with blind spots I didn't want to acknowledge, and yet, despite the weight of all that truth, I didn't feel crushed. I felt clearer. That's what surprised me most. The truth didn't destroy me. It stripped me down to something real, something simpler, something honest. I realized then that the dream wasn't about judgment. It wasn't about shame. It was an invitation, a chance to see myself without pride standing in the way. And when you see yourself clearly, you can finally choose who you want to become. What Jesus showed me wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, every person, every generation, every nation that struggles to change because it refuses to look in the mirror. We like the idea of transformation. It sounds heroic. It sounds noble, but transformation demands something we rarely give humility. Humility isn't dramatic. It isn't glamorous. It doesn't get applause. Humility is quiet. Humility is slow. Humility asks you to admit the parts of yourself you'd rather hide. It forces you to acknowledge the history that shaped you, the privileges you didn't ask for but still benefited from, the mistakes you repeated because they were easier than facing the truth. People say they want the world to get better, but the world doesn't change. People do. And people only change when they stop defending the lies they've told themselves for years. Maybe the real challenge isn't becoming someone new. Maybe the real challenge is becoming someone honest. Honest enough to admit where we come from. Honest enough to face our past without rewriting it. Honest enough to let our pride die so something better can live. If there is a message worth carrying forward, it is this. Truth doesn't break us. Denial does. And humility isn't the end of strength. It is the beginning of wisdom. I don't know what you believe. I don't know what you've been taught. I don't know the stories you've had to protect just to get through life. But I do know this. If you've listened this far, something inside you is already searching for truth. Maybe quietly, maybe painfully, but searching. And if there's one thing I've learned from that night, it's this. Most people never change because they never stop defending the version of themselves they wish were true. But you're still here, still listening, still open. So maybe, just maybe, the message wasn't meant for everyone. Maybe it was meant for you.